So, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for this week's Loden Sports Outlier Session. My name is Matt Pajak, co-founder of Loden Sports. Just a reminder to check out the Loden Sports blog for more info on our upcoming guests. Set those calendar reminders, and we'll see you right back here next week. A quick plug on what Loden Sports is. We are the affordable human performance data provider. We use non-exclusive, objective athletic evaluations for the purposes of tracking athletic development, informing athlete health, and identifying outliers. Our evaluations are non-sport, gender, skill level, or age specific. They are for anyone and everyone, just like these outlier sessions. If you're interested in learning more or getting in touch, visit our website at lodensports.com, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Loden Sports, and read our blog, which is also available through our website. The outlier sessions have been created as a way to bridge the gap and create a connection between the aspiring and the achieving. All of our guests have a niche at the highest levels of baseball and are an outlier in their own right. We want to take some time to talk about long-term athlete development, LTAD, in the context of their experiences, their processes for taking care of themselves, and get to know a little bit more about their personal interests as well. With all that being said, we know there are so many other places you could be, and we want to thank you for being here with us. So we hope you're able to take something you learn here and apply it in your life. This session will be broken up into two parts. For the first part, we have a series of questions for our guests, and for the second part, we'll invite you all to join the conversation, and when we get there, we'll walk you through exactly how to do that. And now, I'd like to introduce current Milwaukee Brewers minor league outfielder, Swiss Army knife, and the ultimate team guy, Noah Campbell. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, exciting times. Noah, provide us some background on yourself. How old you are, where you're from, high school, travel ball, where you played for, where you went to college, where you live now, all that good stuff.
Okay, so I'm 22. I live in Durham, and I'm from Durham. I've been here my whole life. I played travel ball with the Evo Shield Canes, and I went to Cardinal Gibbons High School, and I went to the University of South Carolina. And like you said, I'm with the Brewers now. So.
Awesome. So we'll get into the weeds on some of that stuff a little bit later on. But before we get going, a couple things I do want to call out. First off, Noah will be hooking up one person in attendance with a signed game used broken bat. That's sick. Make sure you fill out the link to the Google form in the Outlier Session chat on your left to be eligible to win. The winner will be contacted likely tomorrow. Get your address and get that out to you hopefully in time for Christmas. Additionally, we will be sending out an email in the next day or so for all attendees to claim their free POAP NFT for this session. For those of you who aren't familiar, a POAP is a proof of attendance protocol or simply a digital ticket stub. If you're interested in receiving the email, please fill out the Google form that we have posted in the Outlier Session chat. All right, let's get the show on the road, and per usual, we'll open up with some LTAD related questions for Noah. Loden Sports is in the process of building out an LTAD. Our guide will be an inclusive, holistic, and philosophical reference for developing athletes of all sports and levels of aspiration. In our eyes, everyone is an athlete. Yes, even you parents and coaches. We all can and should find enjoyment in sports in a number of different ways for the entirety of our lives. So we'll get started with the topic of emotional well-being and the importance of gratefulness. There are little things we can do every day to bolster our emotional well-being. It's like a muscle. Needs to be trained. We've done this with all of our guests so far. This exercise is something you can do today and every day. Noah, share with us, what are 3 things you are grateful for today?
Well, I'd say the most obvious one is my family. I mean, just being around them, especially, this time of year, with Christmas coming up and, I have Thanksgiving, but I'm just so grateful and thankful for my family. I mean, all they've done for me. And then I would say just the other people around me that have helped me and pushed me and just, done simple things like just be my friend or make me laugh or whatever. That's those people are just as important. You got to have those in your life. And then I would say overall, I mean, just the fact that I'm where I'm at and that I'm happy. I think that's really my ultimate goal. And I guess a lot of people's ultimate goal in life is to be happy wherever they're at. Whether I'm playing baseball or just at home, I'm glad that I'm where I'm at and I'm happy, and that's what matters most.
That's awesome. I'm going to hit you with my three before we keep it moving. My number one for today: when the leaves come off the trees in the winter, it allows for more natural sunlight to get through, especially in a pretty shady neighborhood that I live in. So be able to see the sun in the winter time when it's usually dark or mostly dark, early is always a positive. Number two, flexible schedules, kind of have the ability to move things around. Obviously, that is a luxury, so definitely grateful for that. And then number three is that I was able to show you a pretty awesome barbecue spot yesterday that's only 2 minutes from your house. So that we were able to get together, have lunch, and enjoy a nice, sunny, warmer day in December and enjoy some good food yesterday. That'll be my number three for today. So rolling right into the next element of LTAD that I want to hit on, ignition. This is something that I love to talk about. So I don't know if you did your homework on this one, but ignition is a key pillar to athlete development. It's what lights the fire for the developing athlete to want to participate in sports, what keeps that fire lit. It's kind of why the number one priority for a young athlete is to find enjoyment in sports, because ultimately it comes down to what's happening in the subconscious, where they're having a positive experience in sport that, keeps them wanting to participate as they get older. So I'm super curious about this with anyone that I talk to, because it's not one of those things where oftentimes you can kind of guess the answer or whatever. It's often something that you wouldn't really expect or guess, but parents, teachers, coaches, they're all responsible for shaping the developmental environment. For you, Noah, who could be one person, could be many in your life, help drive the interest in the sport of baseball when you were younger?
Well, this is an easy one for me. It's my dad. I mean, he's been the biggest influence in my life in terms of baseball for sure. I mean, he's been my longest term coach, and he's my hitting coach to this day. So that's easy for me. It's my dad.
Awesome. What were some things that he did at a younger age that kind of got you hooked in the sport? Because I know we had the conversation about it yesterday, where you were oddly enough talking about another player and observing something at a younger age, where you said you were surprised that kid was still playing baseball now, and that he didn't just drop the sport after, again, what you observed. What were some things that like maybe your dad did when you were younger that kind of got you hooked?
Well, I mean, I think my dad struck a really nice balance for me growing up. I mean, he was definitely tough on me, as I think you need to be to a certain degree with a kid that has aspirations of playing really, really high level baseball or making high level advances in anything. But I think he was the perfect amount of hard on me and really encouraging. But I think the big thing for me when I was younger was, I mean, he played baseball at UNC, and he got drafted 3 times and played a year in professional baseball. And so I've been hearing my whole life how talented my dad was when he played and all this stuff. And that really inspired me, because it tells me, first of all, that I have a good coach. And if he's passing that stuff on to me, then I have a chance to do some of the things that he did, and hopefully I can play. Well, I'm going to play at least 2 years in pro ball, so I haven't beat there, but I think it's I think it's really cool to have a dad that has gone through it too. And I think that's what really inspired me, was just having him around, just knowing that he's been through it all.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's kind of like the whole your dad's your hero in multiple different ways. So do you think it could have been any other sport, or was it always baseball? I mean, it kind of feels like we already know the answer to that question, but I don't know. Did you play any other sports growing up? Did you take to anything else, or just baseball?
So I mean, it was pretty much all baseball. I mean, even from a young age, I was 5 or 6, and my dream was like, I want to play professional baseball. I want to play in the MiLB. So I was really young when I kind of made that decision. I mean, I tinkered with some stuff. I mean, I played basketball a couple times and I played like flag football, but nothing else really caught me like baseball did. So baseball's been it for me my entire life, really.
Yeah, and that's the first time that we've heard that in the short history of the Outlier Sessions, where um, you knew at 5 or 6 years old that you wanted to be a professional baseball player. So, um, yeah, let's move away from LTAD a little bit, and let's talk about your experience as a young athlete, because uh, going way back in time to 2014, you know, you have a really interesting exposure at 14, 15 years old to really high level baseball on a national level, playing for the USA Baseball 15-year national team. Just talk a little bit about how that opportunity presented itself. Obviously it's right here in your backyard, but those 15U guys, you're playing with guys from all over the country. How did you kind of get that opportunity?
Yeah, so the I wanted to play for the USA team for the longest time. I had tried out multiple times before that. I think there was a shift. I would like to say it was 11U and 14U and 17U or something, and then they switched to 12, 15, and 18, which I think it still is today. So I got invited to the NTIS when I was 11 and did not make the team. And then I think I went to the NTIS again when I was 15, or to make the 14U team, so 14U, and I didn't make it. And then they changed it to 15U, and I went to the NTIS again and did not make it. So you're like, how did you make the team? So somebody with USA Baseball was like, hey, but there's still some 40-man spots left. You just need to go to this tournament in Florida, this USA Baseball tournament in Florida, and do well and see if you can get an invite there. So that it had been a few months, so I went there and did pretty well and got invited to the 40-man roster for USA. And then oddly enough, my roommate on that trip was Spencer Torkelson, who some of you may know went first overall in last year's draft in 2020. But he was my roommate and he didn't make the team, but that's besides the point for now. I mean, I had a good week. I remember in the middle of the week, I was doing okay at this point, and they had like little in between, or like after a workout, they were like, "We're gonna have meetings and just like let you know where you're at before the last few days of this." And they were like, "Hey, like you're a good baseball player, but I think the next couple of days you really need to stand out to make this team." And I did really well the next 2 days and ended up making the team. And obviously there were some incredible players on that team and some incredible memories. But that's how I ended up making that team. It was a long road from getting cut quite a few times to being told that I was kind of on the borderline to make the team, and then ending up making the team. It was definitely it was a really awesome experience for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that I had no idea, but the Spencer Torkelson overlap just goes to show you how small of a world baseball is.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
Kind of in that vein, though, looking back at the specific roster, and we're not even going to talk about Spencer Torkelson, but you had a guy on that team that went 1-1 in the 2017 MLB draft, Royce Lewis, and then obviously Hunter Green was on that team, a whole bunch of other guys. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you got guys that were on that team that are done playing competitive baseball. So I want you to kind of speak on, from your perspective, the importance or unimportance of being one of the 20 best players in the country at 15 years old. And additionally, how making that team doesn't necessarily define who you'll be as a baseball player 3, 4, 5 years down the road. I think a lot of kids, and maybe even more so parents, get caught up in that. But I think you can even lump in Spencer Torkelson as a good example of someone who didn't make that team, who a couple years down the road, went 1-1 in the draft. So floor is yours on that one.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the biggest thing for that is I just believe everybody has their own journey. I think everybody has their own goals, And I mean, there are a lot of baseball players, their goal is to play MLB baseball. I mean, make a USA team when they're younger. I mean, you have short-term, long-term goals. But I think everybody's journey is different. I mean, like I said, I got cut a few times and then ended up making the team. Torkelson got cut and, ended up going 1-1 and had a great year in pro ball. He'll probably be in the big leagues next year. And then, I mean, one of my good friends is Joe Adele, and he didn't make the 18U team, and he was living with me that summer, and we both didn't make the team for the 18U roster. But I mean, I think it's just when you make the team, I think it really does give you a good confidence boost. But I think part of maturing in baseball is when you get a moment like that, you have to realize that like the work is just starting then. You haven't made it yet. And that happens throughout your baseball career. I mean, you get a scholarship to college, the work doesn't stop. You got to work hard so when you get there, you have a chance to play. And then, you get drafted, the work's not done there. You got to work even harder to make it to the MLB. And once you get to the MLB, you got to work even harder to stay there. So I mean, making the team is great, but I think I've said it a few times now, but everybody has their own journey. Everybody at some point I think everybody at some point struggles with something or making a team, or whether it's early in your life or later in your life. But I think just fighting through those struggles and moving forward and getting better as a player just over time is what everybody needs. And, I wouldn't worry about making the team too much. I mean, it's obviously a huge honor and it was awesome. But as you know, Spencer Torkelson, Joe Adele, I mean, Joe Adele's a big leaguer. Spencer Torkelson will be a big leaguer. And these guys are, I mean, they're some of the best in the game, and they both didn't make USA rosters at the time. So it's important, but it's not everything.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a whole bunch of really good stuff in there. And not to go back to LTAD or anything, but you did kind of touch on the importance of ignition and keeping that fire lit through adversity and when you don't make a team. And, as you continue to work your butt off at every level for that next opportunity, it's like, what is that fire every day that keeps you going and gets you back in the gym and gets you up early and gets you out to the field and all that different stuff. So that was some really good stuff. I also do want to mention one more time, just, you brought it up, at 15 years old, some guys, their arrow is green and it's going up. Some guys, their arrow is yellow and it's going sideways. And some guys, arrow is red and it's going down after that, and I just think that it's important that a lot of kids, and again, the parents don't put the pressure on the kids at such an early age where it's like, oh, you didn't make the 12U team, you didn't make the 15U team. This isn't the end of the road for you. So obviously, you and your perspective, incredibly unique, having been on that 15U team. And again, the Spencer Torkelson crossover, I think fits in perfectly with that whole conversation. So I do want to talk about something else that presented itself around the same time when you were on that 15U national team that not a lot of families or parents or players can really prepare for unless they've been there before with an older sibling that's been a high-level player. But you mentioned to me that the USA baseball experience in 2014 kind of opened the floodgates for draft advisors to reach out to you. You didn't even have a driver's license yet. Between you and your family, how did you handle that situation?
Yeah, so I remember being there and there was a ton of advisors and they were handing you their, whatever, their pamphlets or whatever they whatever they had for you. And I was so young and, it was new to my dad and new to my mom and my whole family. And we were a little confused at first, but I mean, we had made some personal relationships that made it a little easier for us. But I think going through that, I think one of the big things I learned was just like, first of all, you need to like do your research on these companies. You need to know what they're about. You need to know like their clients. You need to know all that stuff. And then I think on top of that is finding the right company for you. But I also think look beyond the company and who are the right people for you. It's not just about, the big name or the whatever, but like really forming those personal relationships. Because I mean, if you're going to have a long baseball career, you're going to have that agent. I mean, you can switch agents, I guess, but you're going to have that agent for a long time, and that agency, and dealing with the people that they have is going to be really big. So those personal relationships, I think, are one of the big foundations of why I selected who I selected. And just obviously the company is really well known with Boris, but I mean, the personal relationships I made with Garrett Gore and Bob Brower and Brett Knief, like those guys are all awesome people. And I think that really helped our decision.
So I guess, and you touched on it there, but if you had advice, and I don't know if you might have had a different experience than what some other kids might have, because your dad was a high level baseball player. So it wasn't completely foreign to you guys, but what advice do you have for the amateur player who gets approached by advisors? Because this isn't something that every amateur player gets at 15 years old. That kind of attention, and there are a select few out there who will be completely blindsided by this. So, I guess maybe just pick out like maybe one piece of advice that you'd give to an amateur player and their family when you get approached by an advisor.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is, for me, it was, do you feel like this person can be a part of your life, and like a big part of your life potentially, and do you feel like they really represent what you want to represent as a person, not just as a baseball player? So I think the personal relationship side is the big thing for me, I would say. And beyond that, obviously, do your research, know about the company. But I think the personal relationship is where it starts.
Yeah, so it's almost like you're adding a family member.
Yeah, I mean, Garrett, who I talked to, I mean, he's like family. We go get food, and we just have normal conversations. It's not like we strictly talk baseball or anything. Like he's a great friend to our family, and I mean, I can't imagine not having him in my life, even, as an agent, as a friend, whatever. I mean, he's an incredible person. So I think that's really, really big.
Awesome. So when did you start getting college looks, and how did you choose South Carolina? Was it something where you were already committed when you were on that 15U team? Was it super early, or did it happen after that? Kind of talk us through your college process.
So I committed before I played on the USA team. I think it was probably a month and a half before I committed to South Carolina. So the process for me, I think I mean, around that time I was making the USA team. So I was a pretty good player growing up. Like I wasn't, so I had some opportunities early on to get some offers. So I think I was in eighth grade. Actually, I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to say that, but I was in eighth grade and I got a verbal offer, like I don't know whatever, from Liberty in the eighth grade. And after going to a camp there, because I think I went to another camp which had a whole bunch of coaches at it. It was an ECB camp. It was a Canes camp, and Liberty said, "Hey, you want to come to a camp?" And I was like, "Yeah." So my dad and I, in eighth grade, went to this Liberty camp, had a pretty good camp, and they offered me in eighth grade. So, I mean, that's pretty early, obviously. And then at that time, I was like, you know what? I got to get pretty serious about like where I would want to go to school. So I made a list of 5 schools, and, had some others in there, but I had 5 schools that I was interested in. And then my second offer was South Carolina, which was one of the schools on the list. I went to a camp at South Carolina. I mean, they had seen me play before in some sort of dynamic tournament or perfect game tournament, but I went to a camp, and I did pretty well at the camp, and they ended up offering me after the camp. And then I slowly, over the next 6-7 months, that was in the winter, got offers from other places. And then it was June, and I was like, you know what, I feel like I should just make a decision, so it won't have to be over my head, and I can let these guys know where I'm going to go. So I ultimately decided on South Carolina, and I think a big thing is going through this process is like, the respect that you have for the coaches of the programs that offered you and took the time to talk to you and all this stuff, and then also obviously the respect for the school where you're going to end up. So I think when I committed, I called, or I tried to get in touch with all the coaches that had offered me and let them know that I was going to go to South Carolina. And then I called South Carolina last to let them know. So the Liberty coach didn't find out through the grapevine that I had gone to South Carolina, and I didn't let them know. So I think I learned that from my dad and another family friend, Wilson Hoyle, who was talking about the value, like the respect that you have to have for these people taking their time. So I made those calls and ultimately ended up committing to South Carolina.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Just in terms of being tactful in your approach and kind of understanding the impact of making that decision. Because I think, in the world we live in today, everything's so fast, so immediate. You make a decision, you want to tell the world, whether it's on Twitter, Instagram, whatever that may be, what your decision is. But to your point, there's a lot of people who put a lot of time and effort into recruiting you, and that respect piece is huge. So one, it's great to hear that, and two, obviously great advice for whoever may be listening to this. So let's transition a little bit. We're going to jump a couple of years. We're going to jump over, your Tournament of Stars experience, all that. I want to get into your college and pro ball experience because I think it's pretty unique. And I do want to start with, the opportunity that you had to play not one, but 2 summers up in the Cape Cod Baseball League. I think very few players have the opportunity to go twice, let alone once. You played for the Armand Dennis Red Sox both summers, Coach Pick. This is the top collegiate summer league in the country, has so much history. You must have been aware of that going in. So with that being said, talk about your expectation, being from North Carolina, for what it was going to be like, and then the reality of what it actually was. Because I think for some people that I've talked to in the past that haven't been to Cape Cod, Massachusetts, it is a little bit of a shock, just in terms of what you heard versus what it actually is.
Yeah, so I think this is another situation where I can really thank my dad for preparing me, because my dad played for Wareham back in the day. So he went to the Cape Cod League back in his college days, and he loved it. Like, some of his best baseball experiences, he said, happened up there. So he gave me a good idea of what I could expect. He was like, you're just gonna go up there, you're gonna have fun, you're gonna play baseball every day, and like that's pretty much what I took it as. He was like, it's gonna be beautiful weather and all this stuff. I was like, okay, and so went up there, and the host family thing is probably the most different thing that I would have, different experience that I've had. So I would say that was probably the biggest adjustment from what I expected. But for the most part, I would say it was exactly what I expected. Just good quality baseball, good times with your teammates, and just getting out there and playing every day, or just about every day at the very least. And I loved both years in the Cape, and I stayed with the same host family for both years, and it was a special experience. I really enjoyed it for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure you had your routines on the baseball field, but as someone who interned up in the Cape Cod Baseball League and lived up there for a summer, 2 summers actually, I'm sure you had your routines off the field as well. Did you have your beach spot and your regular spot for lunch or breakfast or whatever that might be, kind of locked in after year 1, so that year 2 you were kind of on autopilot, you already knew where to go?
Yeah, I would definitely say I'm definitely more of a chill type person, so I wasn't going to the beach very often. Actually, I think I only went like twice, like once per year. Um, but I mean, there were some spots right close to the YD field, which was really fortunate. I mean, can't survive without the Dunkin' Donuts. There's a Dunkin' Donuts right there. I love lobster and lobster rolls. So I mean, and you're on the Cape, so like there's lobster everywhere. So anywhere I could go to find a good lobster roll, I'd go mix it up. And but it was nice going for the second time because I had a good feel of just what it was like. I mean, I knowing that you're going to go up there and there's not going to be Chick-fil-A's on every corner like there seems to be in Durham, North Carolina, or Columbia, South Carolina. And knowing that there's only one Chick-fil-A, and that Chick-fil-A is at the Hyannis Mall, and so that's what you're going to have to deal with. But I thoroughly enjoyed my experience there, and I mean, getting to know the spots for the second year was definitely big. But I'm definitely more of a chill person. So, but I will say that my host family did have a pool in their backyard, so it did make it easier for me to be more chill. So
Yeah, and I know from my experience up there that a pool in the backyard on the Cape is hard to come by because the beach is so close for everyone. And um, yeah, I do want to put this out there, disclaimer to the world, like you can go chill at the beach. So as chill of a guy as Noah is, he's like, oh, I don't go to the beach because I'm a chill guy. Come on, Noah.
yeah, I mean that's on me. I don't know. I would, if I wanted to go in the water, I would just go in the backyard into the pool. But most of the time, I'm just tired. Honestly, playing every day is definitely tough.
No, I'm with you. It's way easier to just hop into the backyard and hop in a pool if you got it. So, but that's awesome to hear that you kind of dove in. And to your point, yeah, there isn't Chick-fil-A's on every corner, and for that matter, there really aren't a ton of commercial options. And it's a lot of you kind of have to dive in and talk to some people and know the spots. And I think that's what's really unique about the Cape and part of the whole experience. So, you know, um, something that I do want to kind of talk about, in that vein, did you have other options for what to do that like those 2 summers, or was it just like, hey, I'm going to the Cape?
Yeah, so I mean, I think everybody kind of has the option to stay back and like lift and hit on your own at school or whatever. But I wanted to play. I mean, I remember a conversation I had, a just chance coincidence. I went to a Duke basketball game, and we happened to know the assistant athletic director at Duke, and he got us tickets. And he said, "Guess who's here?" And we're like, "Who?" And this is like right after he got drafted first overall. But Dansby Swanson was at the game, and it was after the game. He was like, "Hey, you want to meet him?" And I was like, "Yeah, like I'd love to meet Dansby Swanson. Why not?" I'm like in high school, like big fan. Watched Vanderbilt when he played there, and so we talked to Dansby for a while, and he was really big on baseball is one of the few sports that you can like do all the work you want outside of the game, but until you play it more, like it's just not the same. So I wanted to play. I didn't want to stay and lift. Uh, so I went to the Cape both summers. I mean, the second summer, I guess I kind of had a chance earlier in the year. I didn't have a great sophomore season at South Carolina, so that didn't help. But I could have, if I would have had a better season, played for the USA college national team, but I didn't. So I ended up back in the Cape. But obviously, I'm not complaining. I very much enjoyed my time on the Cape.
Yeah, and I can kind of speak to it from having been on the inside at that point. There's a lot of guys that go to the Cape after their freshman year, and not a lot of guys, but what I'm saying is like a lot of the higher end guys who have a shot to play for that college team, after their sophomore year. And, when they find out they don't make the USA team, instead of going to the Cape for a second year, they just shut it down because they're kind of disappointed. Um, I feel like that's a pretty regular thing. So, kind of hats off to you. Obviously you struggled your sophomore year at South Carolina and you went right back up to the Cape and had another great year. You kind of like, if you look at your statistics, you look at Baseball Reference, it's kind of funny to see that you had more success with wood than with metal during your college career. Like, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this was actually probably the most common question I got in my like scout meetings that I had my junior year at South Carolina. They were like, what's the deal? They were like, you had a solid freshman season at South Carolina, had a great summer, and then you didn't have a very good sophomore year, and then you had another good Cape year. And they were like, what's the deal? What's the deal with that? And I was just like, you know what? I mean, first of all, struggles are going to happen. Baseball's too hard for you to sit there and pretend like you're just going to hit 350 every year or whatever. But I mean, I think for me, I really enjoy just going out there and playing every day and not having other things to worry about. My answer to the scouts was I believe that I just had a lot on my plate at South Carolina. I was a biology major, and that was a lot of work and a lot of studying. And then on top of that, you have a lot of practice and all this stuff. And it was just it was tough for me. It's not like I wasn't putting in the work for baseball. I just believe that it was just a lot on my plate, and I couldn't fully devote my time to baseball, which I would have liked to. But I mean, you're a student athlete for a reason. You got to put in the work on both ends. So I think that definitely had some play in it. But to be completely honest, it could be anything. But that's what I like to tell myself right now, at least.
Yeah, and I just think it's really interesting. I was kind of curious to hear ultimately what you had to say on it. But we've seen it go the other way so often, where a guy in his college season will hit 11, 12, 13 home runs, and then go play in a wood bat summer league and hit one or two. It goes all the way back to Chris Bryant. Chris Bryant had that experience. You can look at his Cape stats. He didn't hit home runs on the Cape, and he led the country in home runs at San Diego. And there's a couple more recent examples as well, but just kind of funny. You're kind of the opposite guy, so not a bad thing, because obviously now you're in professional baseball, you play with wood. So if you could pick one, wood would be the one. But
Yeah, for sure.
I want to jump into your junior year a little bit, and you're going to be one of those athletes, regardless of whether it's baseball or whatever sport it might be, that ultimately will have this etched as part of their story. But you're 14 games in, and the coronavirus comes in and ends your season. You didn't exactly come out of the gate guns blazing in February. What's going through your mind from a pro ball standpoint, especially coming off of a really good Cape and then kind of a little slow out of the gate that junior year, your draft year?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously there was a lot of uncertainty at that time, so I didn't really know what was going on. But initially, I was like, okay, well, I guess they're just going to have a 40 round draft like they normally do. And, I I wasn't really concerned that I wouldn't get picked in the 40 rounds. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, I felt like just on my Cape alone, I felt like I could get picked in the 40 rounds. So I wasn't all that concerned. And then obviously they it shifted to 5 rounds, which was a big difference. So I didn't really worry about it up until the 5 round thing, but I would say I would say I was mostly optimistic. Optimistic. I felt like talking to my agent and everything. I felt like I at least had a decent chance of getting picked, even in the 5 rounds, despite not the greatest college numbers of all time. But overall, I would say I was optimistic.
So you just touched on it. The MLB draft prior to 2020 it's a 40 round draft. Obviously, this past year was 20, but your draft year, a lot of people would say that it's kind of the short end of the stick. There were only 5 rounds. You brought that up. Let's talk a little bit about the circumstances that led to you signing, because players who weren't selected in the 5 rounds of the draft were allowed to sign free agent deals, but for a maximum of $20,000, which is really not a whole lot in the grand scheme of draft bonuses. So a lot of people in your situation might say, He has eligibility left. He's playing in the SEC. He was a standout performer on the Cape for 2 summers. There's more to it than what meets the eye. So kind of talk about your decision to leave South Carolina and sign with Milwaukee and some of the factors that were at play there.
Yeah, so initially I had set a number that I was looking for in the draft, which looking back on it seemed, kind of dumb, but beyond that. So basically draft day 1, I wasn't expecting to get picked in the first round at all, but in talking to my agent, he was like, okay, like this is what we're hearing, blah blah blah. So I had a pretty good feeling going into day 2. And then pick by pick goes by, and I hadn't heard anything at all. So I was like, okay, this is probably not going to happen. So I basically got my head around, like I told myself if I didn't get picked, I was going to go back to school. So I had my head wrapped around that for a few days. And there was no scout contact allowed for a few days. And you could go into like whatever the draft portal was and like take your name out of the free agency thing. So you want to get any calls. So that's how that was supposed to work. And I just neglected to do that. So like I was all set on going back to school, just all completely set. And I just neglected to do that. And then the first day that the free agency thing was allowed to happen, right at the time, 9 a.m., I get a call from local Brewer Scout. I mean, they drafted me out of high school. So like I've known this guy, Taylor Frederick. I've known him for, I guess, 3-4 years now. And he calls me and he's like, hey, like, we'd love for you to consider signing. And we would really like to help you with some school money. And I was like, I knew about the school money before, but like, I wasn't like, okay, like I have 1 more year of school. Like I think I'm a good student. I was like not worried about that. And he was like, yeah, school and like grad school programs. I was like, what do you mean by that? So I mentioned earlier, I was a biology major and I would like to go to medical school if baseball doesn't work out. So when I said that, I was like, oh, you mean like medical school? And he was like, yeah, I like that. And I was like, I didn't know like that was a thing. I thought it was just like they can just give you money for undergrad. But I mean, I guess looking back on it, I don't know why they couldn't give you money for something else, or for some other school. But so he talked me through that. We had a couple phone conversations. I talked to my agent, and they ended up giving me a good amount of money, in my estimation, for medical school. And my last year of college, that I still had my undergrad that I still had to finish. And I think that's what swayed me. It wasn't the $20,000, like you said, is not, life changing, shattering money, but looking at the opportunity to be able to go to medical school, if all else fails, baseball wise, and have it, mostly paid for, I thought that was really, really, really big in my decision, because I was, like I said, I was planning on going back to school. And then he brought that up, and that swayed my decision to go the other way. So that's how I kind of ended up where I'm at now. And I think that school money is it changed the game, I guess you could say.
It's a really cool story to hear, because those are the stories that you typically don't hear, following that 5-round draft. There were a ton of guys that signed for 20K, and they were all different levels of, Power 5 guys, non-Power 5 guys, guys who, had some name recognition, guys who you'd never heard of before, whatever, and you didn't really think about any of the circumstances around them signing. They were all just getting the same amount, 20K, 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 but the differentiator was really for you what Milwaukee had to offer that, ultimately is going to far outweigh the 20K you signed for. So really cool, and appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's important to let parents know that that's a thing, so they can bring it up to their scouts or their agent when their kid's looking to sign. That, because getting an education is just so important. So I think having that as part of your deal in one way or another, I think is really, really big.
I agree 100%. So you sign with Milwaukee and you get assigned to the low A affiliate out of minor league spring training, the Carolina Mudcats in Zebulon, North Carolina. Zebulon. I don't know, I'll probably get made fun of for how I say it if anyone listening actually knows where that is. But it's a little more than 30 minutes from your house in Durham. Tell us what it was like playing so close to home. Like, I know you got to sleep in your bed every night, which you might have been the only minor leaguer in America who could say that, you know.
Yeah. So strangely enough, I played with Ashton McGee, who I played with growing up, and he also got to stay at home, which I think might be the craziest coincidence of all time. That one, we played together growing up for 8 years, ended up on the same minor league team, and then we played on the same minor league team and both got to stay in our own beds. Which, I mean, that's just, what are the odds of that happening? But it was really, really, really cool. I've been thinking about this recently, especially with minor league baseball or Major League Baseball, I guess, paying for housing next year. I was like, I signed for $20K, like officially, like money in the bank account, but it was like I entered minor league baseball at the right time, and the circumstances just happened to really work out because I stayed at home, didn't have to pay a dime for housing this year because they weren't covering it this year, and didn't have to really spend money on food because I'm living at home and my parents are very, 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 they're the best and they provided food. And the only thing I really had to spend money on was gas and food, I guess, on the road. So I saved all that money, and then next year I'll get to save all that money on housing again because they're paying for Major League Baseball's paying for it. So staying 30 minutes from my house was really nice, especially I think the best thing about it, honestly, is that my parents got to come to every game that they wanted to, which was just about every game, because not almost all the games were within a few hours or even just 30 minutes. And I think having them come to every game, having my family come to every game, or just about every game, was just really special for me because obviously they were instrumental in me getting here. So I think that just having them to support me, especially in my first pro season, was just really, really special.
Yeah, it's really cool how the stars kind of aligned on that one. But, with that being said, you're going to get your first true taste of minor league baseball this year when you're up in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I know. It's good. I've been telling people it's like I almost played like travel baseball for a year, and in some sort of way, it's like you go to your game, you come back home, and you're just around your family. You get a home cooked meal. But next year, I'm going to be getting my real minor league baseball experience in a hotel all year, or whatever housing they put me in. But I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to get back out there already. But
well, I do want to talk a little bit more about your experience in pro ball this year because and I don't want to harp on it, the whole signing bonus thing, but there's a playing time pecking order in professional baseball, and it's not something that a lot of fans or hopeful professionals are necessarily aware of. But it is an accomplishment that you saw the field in 100 games this year, 5 out of 6 each week. A lot of other guys who signed as free agents after the 2020 draft didn't see nearly the amount of time that you saw. So, I know there's other guys out there who played on the Cape who signed for 20K, and, they had a third of the at-bats that you had this year. Talk about the playing time expectation that was set in spring training by the Brewers and how you put yourself in a position to exceed that expectation during the year.
yeah, so I think I've told my parents this. I've told a couple people this. I said I think going into spring training, I felt like I don't know how much I would have played, but I had a good feeling going into it that like I felt like nobody really know who I was. Like, you go in, like obviously people know who you are, but nobody really knew who I was. And I was like, I'm gonna get to whatever affiliate they send me to, and I'm going to probably be on the lower end of the totem pole and play like 2 or 3 days a week. And then I went out there and had a pretty good spring training, and that put me on the Mudcats first of all, instead of staying in extended spring, which was, I guess, the first obstacle. And then once you got there, like I'm playing on a team with our second, our third, our fourth, and our fifth round pick or not our fifth round pick, but our second, third, and fourth round picks from that year, and then a whole bunch of other guys that signed for a good bit more money than I did. And I wasn't really expecting a lot. I think our manager was pretty upfront, and I think playing for my manager in spring training, I think he really liked the way I played the game and just the way I carried myself. So I think that definitely helped. But I think me going out there and just playing really hard opened up a lot of eyes. It wasn't necessarily that I went out there and I was the best player on the field or anything, but my manager told me on multiple occasions that he just loved the way I played and ran hard and did all the little things like that. So I think that definitely played into why I ended up getting so many at bats. And I mean, not saying that other guys don't do that, but I just think for me specifically, I know that I went out there and gave everything I had when I was out there and took advantage of the opportunities that I was given in spring training. And I think that really propelled me to playing in 100 games this year.
Yeah, and I think there's a whole bunch of different variables at play, and we'll touch on a couple of them. I think we're going to go a little long here, but I think there's so much to talk about with your journey and your experience that I think it kind of warrants taking a couple extra minutes to break some of this stuff down. But one of those variables I think that contributes, you're a team guy and you have flexibility. Obviously you're an athletic guy. I've evaluated you a number of different times, as Loden Sports prior with USA Baseball. You had the versatility to play different positions. And I think, if you're healthy and you have the versatility to play different positions, I think that opens up the door for you to potentially get on the field every night. So you played 9 positions in the last game of the year, and it wasn't your first appearance on the mound either. How did that come together? And talk a little bit about catching, because I know that you've mentioned in the past to me that, let's talk about catching a little bit and just the appreciation that you now have for people who put on the gear and sit behind the plate.
Yeah, so I think it was really early on in the year, and my manager was like, I think at this point in the season, I probably had played 3 or 4 or 5 positions. And he was like, you know what? I think by the end of the year, I'm going to have you play on 9 positions. I've had a player do it before. I think you'd really enjoy it. We're going to do it. And I was like, okay. And we didn't talk about it all that much. I mean, I'd catch in between innings, just like warming up pitchers. And that was terrifying enough for me. And then we got to the last week of the season, and he was like, hey, if on Sunday we are not playing for a playoff spot, because there was only 2 teams that went to the playoffs, he was like, if we're not playing for a playoff spot on Sunday, you're going to play on 9 positions. And I was like, all right, well, I mean, I'm going to need to probably catch like an actual bullpen because I've never caught in my entire life. It's the one position I've never played, or I had never played, I guess, at this point. And I was like, okay, I just need to do that. So early in the week, I caught a bullpen, nice and easy, nothing crazy. I ended up catching that same guy on Sunday, and I have a new appreciation for how catchers, first of all, stay hydrated, because I was dying back there in all that gear with the warming up of the pitcher and everything. And then I have a new appreciation for just how tough it is back there. And I don't think I could have had an easier inning where I didn't have to block. I didn't have any foul tips. I didn't have to throw anybody out. I didn't have anything like that. And it was still the hardest position I've ever played in my life, and I have played all of them before. So every other position for me was not that bad. I had played first, second, short, third, outfield, and I had pitched a few times. And pitching is whatever. As a position player, you just kind of go in there and lob the ball in the zone. But yeah, the catching is definitely a different animal. I definitely have respect for all the catchers out there. So any catchers listening, you're doing a great job.
Yeah, salute to Soup down in the audience.
Shout out to Soup. I love the nickname. That's also my nickname, so I really respect it.
Yeah, long lost cousin. Anytime we're on the road, I can hear him leaving his hotel room because his ankles click, and I think that's probably from all that time he spent behind the dish over his life. But kind of aside from the versatility, right? One of the reasons and another variable for why you're able to see action in 100 games this past year is because of your health. And with the exception of a freak rib injury that didn't even require an IL stint, you maintained your health all year. So, what do you attribute to remaining fresh for an entire professional baseball season? And generally speaking, talk about your routines because it's a war of attrition.
Yeah, so I think of the first step is obviously in the off season you need to get as strong and flexible as you can, move. Like, so when you get to spring training, you're not like, this is not the first time you've run a sprint. This is not the first time that you've swung, I don't know, say 80 times in a day. This is not the first time you've taken a ground ball. You need to be in good shape when you get to spring training. Maybe everybody's a little bit different, but for me, I showed up to spring training in some of the best shape I've been in my life, and I stuck to a pretty good stretching routine and a good warm up throughout the season. I think that was big, and then I think doing what you need to do in the weight room is also big. Like, you shouldn't force yourself to go in there and crush weight like it's the off season, but doing a little bit every day was what really helped me. I would say I would go in there and they have a workout, and you're supposed to do, for us, it was 2 workouts a week. And I go in there and I just do a little bit of the workout over like 2 or 3 days instead of just doing all one day. So I was always doing a little something, and then I was stretching every day. And I mean, it's not to say that I went out there every day. I felt 100%, because I didn't. But I mean, it was all manageable stuff. So I think the stretch routine, the lifting routines, like, these things are important. You hear it all the time, but I mean, people aren't lying when they say you need to have a good routine, because it definitely pays dividends.
Yeah, and we'd be remiss if we didn't shout out Travis Lindhorst, the Edge Sport Performance in Durham.
Mm-hmm.
For all the work that he's put in with you and a handful of other guys in the off season. Travis really does some pretty awesome things in there, and obviously helped you, especially through the COVID season, put yourself in a position to not only maintain but continue to get stronger and more flexible and help your routines leading into your Pro Bowl. So you did some weekly jump testing this year, over at Travis's spot, both single leg and 2-legged vertical jump type stuff. Talk a little bit about how you use that information.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for allowing me to do that. I mean, you were doing it for your own testing purposes, but for me, I think it was really helpful, because I mean, it showed me the toll that it can take week to week, and what I need to do to stay, relatively even with what I'm doing, like explosiveness wise, athletically. I think that was really beneficial to me also for maintaining my health, because I knew every week kind of where I was at in terms of, is my left leg a little better, my right leg a little better? Am I low on all my jumps? So that was really helpful for me. But for me, I was kind of using it as like, it was really encouraging and kind of motivated me, because I was like, I'm doing the right things, because my numbers didn't just go down drastically. My numbers were fairly consistent every week. And I attribute that to the routines that I talked about, getting good sleep. I think sleep is not talked about enough in terms of health. I would try to get my 8 hours, and at worst I'd get 7. Get the 8 hours every day, and I think that definitely paid into why I was able to stay healthy, and also why my jumps were so consistent.
Yeah, you talked about it a little bit there. did it give you confidence to know that your body was maintaining a certain level of performance even as the summer wore on?
Yeah, I mean that was the big thing for the going in there every Monday, and seeing the numbers afterwards. It was like, okay, well, I am just as explosive as I was in week 18 as I was in week 1, 2, or 3. So it was like, I know that a lot of the guys are not doing exactly the same things that I'm doing, and in terms of getting their sleep and working out and everything, um, keeping the body fresh. And I think that it gives you a little competitive edge. Even if the guys are doing it, you can tell yourself that you have an edge on them. Not to reference Travis's gym's name, but you have an edge on those guys. So I think that was definitely a nice little confidence boost.
Yeah, and for the second week in a row, I would like to call out that we have a former contestant in the Great Durham Pun competition in the audience, Cole Conley. So, I'm sure he appreciated your pun there with the edge. But to your point, giving you that little bit of edge, everyone knows how mental the game of baseball is. Like, that could be the little separator that puts you over the top on a given day or in a given week or in a given series, whatever it may be. So, we're certainly happy that sharing that information with you was able to kind of help that mentality a little bit. I do want to speak a little bit on single leg jumps and what you learned about lower half symmetry for baseball players, because, and you can be honest about this, like going into any kind of testing that we did, was it something you were thinking about in terms of how your left leg performs versus your right leg and what that's like compared to other baseball players, or was that something that was just completely out of your mind?
I had heard about it before, just like, being around weights and people in weight rooms, I guess, over time, and health at South Carolina guy. We had a guy come in and test like our hamstring, like, I don't know, we were doing some sort of like hamstring curl, and it tested to see how much of each leg we were using. And so that was like the first introduction I had to it, but it's never been something that, like, until you brought it up, where I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe like some guy's right leg is way significantly different than their left leg or vice versa. Um, so I didn't look into it that much until you brought it up, but it's definitely something that I think you need to pay attention to, because I think that would lead to a lot of injuries if you're really favoring. I've heard that so many times. It's like your back hurts because your hip's tight or something. Like one thing leads to another, and I think that's why having good symmetry leads to better health and better outcomes on the field.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think that's something that a lot more baseball players and softball players and, other sports that involve rotation and kind of an asymmetrical move, naturally hitting and pitching, whether it's softball or whether it's baseball, is an asymmetrical move where you load into one and then you kind of use that other leg as a stopper. I think it's important to educate yourself on it and kind of, again, to your point, like you're able to monitor it all year, and kind of get a look at it. So, my tip of the cap to you for, one, your willingness to come in every Monday on your off day and do this, but two, kind of really like diving in and understanding how these different things affect performance, not just from, how's my engine doing today? Like, am I, maybe I got a little bit more, wind in the Cape today than I did, or maybe it's a little bit less, but also, the health aspect of the lower half symmetry. So, last question on this. After seeing a full season's worth of jump data on yourself, how will that affect your process moving forward, if at all, going into your second full pro season?
I think for me, it gives me the confidence to know that I was doing a lot of the right things last year. I think when I came in for my first session, I was down on weight. So just making sure that I eat properly and eat enough will definitely be one thing that I bring into next year. And, just make sure I still get that sleep. I think I think that was one of the big things, but training wise, I mean, Travis gets me right every year. And he's been doing that for a long time, strength wise, and then stretching. That's a lot on my own. So I think just continuing all that stuff and then learning from all the weeks that we did it. I think obviously just the little changes that I mentioned earlier. I think those will really help me going forward in the next year.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You drop weight and you can kind of see it illustrated really well in the jump data, how that power number kind of ticks down. And then you start to kind of realize it a little bit when you're taking BP or, in-game hacks where there's a little less punch in the bat. So, it's all kind of tied together. Taking care of yourself impacts how you perform on the field. You don't take care of yourself, and just had a conversation with someone today about a higher draft pick in the past couple drafts that, he lost some weight this year and he wasn't sleeping well and he wasn't eating right. And, he really tapered off over the course of the season. Yeah, obviously that wasn't the case for you. You were able to maintain, which, again, is amazing to see. And you're probably the exception there, but I think it's worth bringing it up at least that there's a lot of guys out there where, yeah, they can lose 15, 20 pounds over the course of the season, and that's going to affect your OPS. So before we transition into part two, I do want to kind of talk a little bit about creating good habits. And instead of, going into a whole, because you've already touched on it, sleep, eating right, recovery routines, in-season lifting, what's something that if there's a kid out there listening to this, whether it's live now or later on down the road, talk about like something that they can do, start small, to start building good habits that they can carry with them later in their baseball career.
Yeah, I think I obviously touched on like the big ones that everybody kind of tells you to do. But I think for baseball and anything, I think you need an escape. I think you need something that takes your mind off the game. We've talked about this before. I play guitar. I think that's I think that's a really great activity. But I mean, just whatever it is, I mean, just find something fun that you enjoyed. Like even if it's video games, just like take yourself away from baseball, take yourself away from whatever you got going on. I don't know if you're in school or something. If you need a break, take a break. I mean, protect that mental health, keep it going in a positive direction. I think those are some big things that you can do just to minimize the stress that you feel playing baseball.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue here. I do want to, you just briefly mentioned it, playing the guitar, a little bit more of a personal touch to kind of put a bow on this conversation before we turn it over to Cole and the gang and the crowd, see if they have any questions for you. But you play the guitar, you kind of mentioned the role that the instrument plays in your life. What got you into music, and what are you listening to or playing these days in the off season? Because obviously you have a lot more time now in the off season to pick up the guitar.
Yeah. So I started playing because we had to take a fine art in high school, and I am probably the least artistic person that I know. My only B in middle school was, in fact, in art, which is really embarrassing. You basically just need to show up and just not turn in garbage. And I guess I just turned in garbage. So, so I was like, you know what? I'm going to take guitar. I think that sounds fun. And I had this little, like, my friend gave me this like cheap guitar and I started playing it and I loved it. And I've been playing it ever since. So it just, just playing it in high school ignited that passion for me. But recently, what have I been playing? I've been playing a lot of acoustic guitar recently, just strumming through chords, finger style stuff. I think, what's the most recent song I learned? think it was Open Arms by Journey, like a little finger style thing. But I mean, I listen to classic rock the most, but this is kind of unrelated. But for some reason, I've been listening to like 70s dance music recently. Like, I don't know, like Staying Alive is, I guess, is a good example, and like Dancing Queen. I don't know why, but
That's awesome.
that has nothing to do with guitar. But that's kind of what I've been listening to recently. But in terms of guitar, I love Pink Floyd. I love Guns N' Roses. I think those are probably my favorite. AC/DC. All of those groups, I could listen to them play guitar all day.
All right. Last one. Favorite Guns N' Roses song? What do you got?
Probably November Rain. Those guitar solos are kind of insane.
Yeah, that's a pretty basic answer, but I'm
It
gonna
is
take
a
your word for it.
it is a basic answer, but I could listen to the first guitar solo all day, and I probably should learn it, considering I have a Les Paul because of Slash. I think that'd probably be good.
Okay, so if you learn that, we're gonna need a recording of it so that we can share with everyone who's listening or will listen to this conversation. And if you don't share it with everybody, I'm gonna at least need to see that because, big Guns N' Roses fan here myself. Big fan
What's your
of
favorite song while we're on it?
Night Train.
Oh, well, Night Train's a good choice too.
Yeah,
So
Night Train. It's just the whole rhythm, the riff, all of that. It's just high energy song. Big fan of it. That whole album of their albums, and I know they're kind of scattered, and they only had a couple there up front. Appetite for Destruction, top to bottom, one of the best albums I've ever listened to. So, yeah, Noah, you packed a whole lot of knowledge into an hour-long conversation. I know we went, 13 minutes over. That's okay. We appreciate you taking the time. Best of luck the rest of the off season.